So our preacher this morning is well known to us because he is one of us. He's been one of us since before he was born. Julian Nesbitt, a graduate of Bishop O'Dowd High School, a graduate of Santa Clara University, and currently employed by the California Coastal Commission, helping to pursue the needed goal, the admirable goal, the spiritual goal of a healthy planet. I've enjoyed working alongside Julian as he has prepared this sermon. I've learned a little bit about how the younger generation uses technology to write things. But Julian has a very good word for us. He has a very good word for us because he knows us, and he knows our strengths, and he knows our non-strengths. Julian has a very good word for us because he comes from a place of real faith and deep caring. And his sermon is titled on this graduation Sunday, A Degree in Faith. Julian?
Thank you, Pastor Jim. So first off, you can join me in your Pew Bible, page 851, Luke chapter 16, verse 10. It reads, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much." Amen. So good morning, Lakeshore. And again, congratulations to all of our graduates. I remember being in the same boat 2 years ago when I graduated from Santa Clara University. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science and a Bachelor of Arts in Music, so 2 degrees. And I have been working at the California State Coastal Conservancy right in downtown Oakland for these past 2 years. So, quick environmental fun fact to show off some of my knowledge I've gained. What is the largest organism to have ever lived? You might think it's the blue whale, or one of the giant sequoia trees here in California, or some long-necked dinosaur, but you'd actually be wrong. In the Blue Mountains of Oregon, there is a species of fungus, the honey fungus. Basically, it acts as a parasite that spreads through forests. They grow these clumps of yellow mushrooms that end up overtaking trees and other woody plants. And this specific honey fungus in Oregon was discovered when scientists took samples of 112 dead trees. Back in 1998, they were investigating why this significant number of trees were dying in this forest in Oregon. And the root samples were taken, and it was revealed that all but 4 of these trees were infected with the honey fungus. And further examination revealed that 61 of these trees harbored specimens that were genetically identical, meaning they had originated from one particular organism. Now, this single honey fungus has been estimated to be 2,400 years old, so already 400 years old by the time Christ is born. And in that time, the fungus has spread across 2,400 acres, which is about 1,665 football fields. So much bigger than any blue whale. And now there's debate about what constitutes an individual organism. And the definition is a group of genetically identical cells that can communicate and have a common purpose. This gargantuan honey fungus ticks those boxes. And so it currently holds the record as the largest known living organism. And it's held that record for a very long time. Now, to think that a thing seemingly so small can have that significant of a presence, of an influence, We'll put a pin in that for later. So yeah, that was just showing off some of the knowledge that I've learned in those classes. And as a result, graduation. It's a time of things that come full circle and new chapters begin and you start anew. In our society, especially for college, it resembles you entering into the world after dealing with the ups and downs of growing up. And there are a lot of those. And ideally, you take the lessons learned in classrooms and your interactions with other people, and you apply those to life. And Sunday school is like that too. I often reminisce on my days with the youth group here at Lakeshore, from the breakout sessions at retreat to vacation Bible camp and children's story, and just learning about God, Jesus, and all the classic stories throughout the Bible. Those are all definitely staples of my time here. Now, to be honest, throughout my childhood up to my college graduation, my faith has been at the center of some of those ups and downs. This society, here you definitely have to walk on eggshells with how you act, how you talk, what interests you have, who you associate yourself with. All these little things that add up, especially when you add different minority labels. If you stray from one of society's ideals, then you could potentially be affecting your access to a life with quality and dignity here. So furthermore, these past 5 years, I'd say, there's been a sort of veil lifted that shows this sad truth, as well as just how much evil is in our world. You have our obvious evils, like corruption and hate, but there are more things underneath: the condescension, denial, lack of accountability, cynicism, that for me I sometimes see as more insidious. I often read news stories during school about these certain vices that show themselves especially in large institutions, including colleges and churches. A lot of the time for me, I only felt truly spiritual and connected to something beyond when I was singing. That was the only time I could block out the noise and block out all the different things people were telling me about how I should be worshiping God or if I should be worshiping God. Other than that time, it was kind of hard to know for sure if there was God or anything out there to guide us along our life journey, when it seems like the message everyone was either directly or indirectly saying was that it was every person for themselves here. And you've got to be, for the lack of a better word, as nasty as possible if you want to get what you want and rise to the top. It's hard to have a faith when the whole time you've been growing up and looking back in retrospect, the world has been this mess. It's hard to have a faith when you learn about all the dreadful things done in the name of religion, specifically Christianity. It's hard to have a faith that people have interpreted to be all about restriction and repression, to the point where people's rights to choice, to existence in one's full, authentic self, and ultimately to life with dignity and respect can be taken away. It's hard to have a faith when people can't seem to comprehend that everything changes over time, for one, including philosophies and mindsets, and two, whatever was instilled in you in your childhood is not the only way to lead your life. You might have grown up learning that the blue whale was the largest organism, but it's okay to learn something new and realize that maybe it is the honey fungus. That's just a symbol. On top of that, people around my age, we were all so young when we were watching planes crash into 2 towers on TV and watch those towers fall in real time. We grew up seeing pictures of the aftermath of a massive natural disaster in New Orleans that took the lives of so many that didn't have to be taken. We grew up hearing about a deteriorating economy around us and a war on the other side of the ocean that took even more lives that also did not need to be fought. And those things were all just in the 2000s alone. This past decade, with the rise of the internet and social media, it's become harder to escape the images of moral decay. And all those vices I mentioned before are on full display. The racism, the police brutality that the world can see over and over, generational trauma from all the injustices and neglects, and all the obnoxious excuses to say that these have to be the way and nothing can be changed. I was a freshman in high school when the Sandy Hook shooting happened. I remember it was in integrated science at Bishop O'Dowd, and our principal announced it on the megaphone, saying you probably heard about it already, and we all joined in prayer for a brief second before going back to our lab. And you could argue it was like a hit in the face of, this is what reality is, and in the aftermath, those we put in power aren't there to care for you, really. And the fact that a shooting of elementary school kids has happened on the 10-year anniversary of Sandy Hook, it's very grossly poetic. It makes it seem like it is a loop, that it was meant to be this way, like the excuses said. And I haven't even mentioned climate change, which I view as a symbol of all of the negativity and the vices and injustices and neglects of mankind coming together to have this really massive monster. Because we're all connected, like everything on earth is connected. So racism and racist policies can lead to exploitation, which leads to destructive capitalism, which leads to deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions and all these other environmental issues that contribute to climate change. So in the end, these little racist actions, with the way people treat each other, can lead to every living thing on this planet being damaged in one way or another. Now, overall, I imagine the way America has shown its true colors has caused you at one point or another to question, how do faith in God really factor into all of this in 2022? Is there room for all of that anyway with all of this anguish? Because what power do you have to change things and do God's work? You're no Moses, you're no David, you're no Elijah, you're no Jesus. You're no big name celebrity or politician, and if you were to become one, who's to say you wouldn't abandon God's will when you have the temptations of that luxurious lifestyle at your disposal? So what can you do about any of the things I mentioned as just a student, just trying to pass exams and get jobs or internships, all the things you have to do to give yourself a better chance of struggling less in this society that inherently tries to make it a struggle? I do think these questions are asked by students in particular and can be reflected in the lack of young people sitting in the physical church. You don't need a global pandemic to see that there aren't a lot of young students and people in these pews, even here at Lakeshore. And now I'm not saying young people don't have a faith or spirituality. It's just that from what I've been exposed to and how I've seen people move in this world, the image of God, for one, and the idea of demonstrating that commitment to God by physically going into a fancy building every Sunday to hear a lot of fancy words like generations before us had is not the same. We all know at Lakeshore that there is much more to faith and spirituality and just being a decent human being than just physically going to church and crossing off a checklist and moving on without thinking about it anymore unless it's convenient. So with all that being said, where do I, a student who's graduated, gotten my degrees, stand with faith? Do I really feel within me that, yes, there's some force at work that I can't explain, and I don't know what they'll do and what their end game is, but there is a force at work to shape my life for the better and yours, and it's up to us to act on it. During quarantine, which was the spring quarter of my senior year, where you literally could not go to church, I did get into things finally like meditation and reflections and deep breathing and like self-care, things that have gotten really popular in these last few years. Things I've meant to get into for a while but never could follow through with because of all the stresses I had on me as a student. Because you have to make sure you're participating in class and acing those midterms and networking and being involved in clubs and social life. There's no time to really be still. We have all this information about so many different things thrown at us in the classroom, on television, online, all with varying degrees of goodness and maliciousness. There is just no time to look up at the sky and in the heavens when we have all these other directions that we have to look at instead. Well, in quarantine, there was that opportunity to try those things out, with all that noise quieted for a brief period of time. There's no direction to go but inwards and right around me. I wasn't able to block out the noise all the way like I wanted to. I couldn't see how and why immediately, why God might have shaped my life the way he shaped it, and get answers to the question of what is God exactly doing in the midst of all this mess. A thing I learned about while working in campus ministry at SEU was the idea of talking to Jesus like you would talk to your best friend, like on a walk or texting or FaceTime, someone to lean onto. Yeah, it's just a literal, casual acknowledgement of Jesus as a friend, someone or something just at my side through all my emotions and activities, just inviting him in each of these moments, no questions asked, every single little one. There weren't any big demonstrations I did or proclamations of repentance or any rituals, no restrictions of anything or holding anything back because it would seem unholy in God's eyes. What I was doing instead could be seen as very little. But for me, it's in that simplicity where the real magic can begin. One of the key lessons of my work with the Coastal Conservancy has been meeting people where they are. When it comes to environmental issues that will certainly affect communities of color and low income the most, it's not really the state or even local governments that are making the direct changes in communities. Rather, it's the local nonprofits, the advocacy groups with trusted community members that serve as liaisons between their neighbors and the higher up organizations. That's where the direct, tangible change happens in those communities that helps curb those environmental issues. You have to talk about different concepts to people and communicate in a way that anyone can understand. No technical jargon, which in the past has been used purposefully to exclude people from these important conversations. Just talk like a normal person. And I think that it can apply to spreading God's will. Just explaining the miracles, the purpose of the crucifixion, and everything in there like it's just casual conversation. Jesus' sacrifice was to give us freedom and the promise that we will be taken care of, and he is accompanying you throughout your messy life. Why? Because he loves us that much. There are all these different complex ways people try to describe love and dictate what love is. But I think if you look at love as just the manifestation of God's will and Jesus' sacrifice, that's really all you need. With each of your actions during the day, who you hang out with, talk to, whatever you watch, what music you listen to, basically all the things in this world that excite you or get you to care about stuff, God probably directed you in those paths one way or another. So if you put God's love in the middle of that and lead with that, I can see a lot of the anguish and frustration that leads to those vices which exacerbate the problems of today starting to fade away. And I'm not saying just loving more powerfully and tangibly will automatically solve climate change, but I think it can lead to that change in attitude that's needed collectively to change things on a higher scale. Just imagine it. Just try. I think that simple message has the potential to reach anyone, regardless of their faith or if they're just secular. Because when thinking back to the verse, this very little action of looking inward at what is rooted deep inside of you, all of you, be it the Spirit of the living God or something with a different name, that can have huge positive consequences. But if you're just dismissing this notion outright, being dishonest with this very little idea, then how exactly can you expect to ever get anything positive done, to get the society to where you want it to be? How can you expect to feel that nourishment that's supposed to come with life? So my advice for graduates from high school, college, and even fifth graders in middle school and kindergartners to first grade. Number one is church doesn't have to be the pews and the stained glass windows, because God is constant no matter how the world changes. The organizations you're a part of can be church. The family you're a part of can be church, if God and his love are at the center for you. Number two is God does not follow society's rules. He doesn't abide by them necessarily. I don't think God honestly intended for humans 2,000 years after the resurrection to be defined by just working 8 hours a day behind a desk, staring at a computer screen in the classroom or in a cubicle, or if you have wealth and influence, to not use it wisely. I don't think that was his image. Basically, what I'm saying is don't let the idea of work and how you function in society consume you so much that you become blind to the core of God's message of love and authentically spreading that love. Number 3 is invite God in all of your moments. If you're in college, invite God on your walk to the classrooms. Invite God when you're going out for the night. Invite God when you're in your dorm room. Invite him in all those moments, even in the ones that society says you're not supposed to have. In terms of making a difference, number 4, focus on helping the people affected the most by the issues of today. What do they really need at the moment so they can see where you're coming from? And just meet them where they are. Don't spend all of your energy trying to align all the time with people committed to misunderstanding you. Arguing with people online and trying so desperately to get the validation of people who are committed to misunderstanding you can so quickly become a time waster. I just feel like compromise can only take us so far, and that God's love can be put to better use. And lastly, the small and grounded actions, those tangible actions, that's where I see God's love being put to better use. It's in the area that is your whole body, the area that is the Oakland community, the Bay Area, the state of California, etc., etc. Just imagine if more people passed that simple message of God's love along just by leading by example. Like the largest organism on Earth, the honey fungus, we can be that group of cells that all communicate and serve a common purpose. Only instead of being a parasite that kills trees, it's a balm that paves the way for healthy, healing, loving roots. So in college, I did a capstone poster rather than a thesis as my final project. So I guess you can say this is kind of like a little thesis for me. The class of 2022, that was the last SEU class where I knew people really well individually, so I can officially cut that chapter off now with life and fully move on, I feel like. So with that being said, thank you for coming to my dissertation, and I'll now be adding a 3rd degree. I'll call it a Bachelor's of Faith in God's love. Amen.
As always, Julian, you bless us, you enrich us, you challenge us, you lift us. Pastor Carolyn, I guess we forgot to get the degree in faith certificate for Julian. Such a good word.